This is the Conscious Radio Network.
All right, welcome back, Conscious Radio Network, here with Reverend Ben Cox from the Chapel of Spiritual Light.
All right, and I'm Justin Wassel. So what we've been talking about at the top of the hour here was table tippings and also intention, what that means, and how folks conduct themselves, and what we're wearing, really, on our vibration. And so I'm going to turn the mic over to Reverend Ben here to continue.
Seances, table tipping, it's all a matter of vibration. Because what is it, and we have to say we don't know, what is it that happens when we pass over into the next dimension? We know that there's an element of consciousness. We know that. We know that mind survives. Now, the philosophers and the scientists will try to tell you that the mind is in the brain. I don't accept that, because the brain is an organ, and when that organ ceases to function, we still hear from people from the other side. So that tells me something. But you've got this business about survival. And my thesis was entitled The Science of Mediumship and Evidence of Survival. And I got to throw a kudo out to Dr. Stephen Browdy, University of Maryland, Baltimore. Dr. Stephen Browdy is now in Las Vegas. I could not convince him to come to Florida. When I talked to him when he retired, he said, Las Vegas beckons. I said, okay. But he wrote a book called Immortal Remains, which was one of the main texts for my thesis. And what we're finding today with the research, it used to be the evidence was about balanced. For survival, against survival. Do we survive bodily death? Do we not? But the evidence today is leaning more towards survival and less towards not surviving. And that there is at least some aspect of us that survives bodily death and can communicate. And being that we are energy, the energy changes form. And I think what we as mediums are actually doing, I think we are making contact with what I call packages of energy that contain information that is coded into that energy. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. It's like decoding it.
Am I talking like a scientist here?
Right, exactly. And this would be the science of spiritualism, really, is what we're getting into.
That's the thing, too, is a lot of people also ask me as far as the levels of the spirit on the other side and the levels of how they're able to communicate and come in.
There are definitely different levels. I'm going to say, from my research, and this is going to take us into the cross-correspondences case, Dr. Frederick Myers, who died in 1901, wrote a book in the 1890s called Human Personality and Its Survival of Bodily Death. Remarkable man. And he studied and he knew things. And when he crossed over in 1901, he had already made it quite clear to his group, he was part of that SPR group, that the best way to prove survival is to have messages sent to several different mediums around the globe in fragments that have to be assembled like a vast jigsaw puzzle, which will indicate that there is an intelligence behind those messages that is coding those and sending them. So I think that's what we as mediums do. I think we are decoding information. And of course, it comes through a human filter. See, when the spirits are dealing with me, they know I'm an historian. They know I'm a musician. They know I'm an opera freak. They know I love Maria Callas. They know certain things. So there's certain kinds of spirits that are going to work with me. And I went through a siege years ago where every reading started with a song, and I had to figure out what that song meant and why they said it to me, you know. They finally quit doing that. I guess they figured. And also, another thing I want to say about mediumship, mediumship is a constantly changing, constantly evolving thing.
And so is this by way of how the material comes through to the medium, or is this just a shifting because of where the medium is at within his or her awareness?
No, it has to do with consciousness. And it has to do with developmental levels.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
You know, it has to do with your development as a medium. As you move ahead and as you are ready to grow, they will change things and give it to you in different ways.
As you're ready for it,
Yeah.
to understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a few constants in my mediumship. One is my mother. God bless you, Jeanette. Love my mom. She passed when she was 50. She was 4'4", weighed 85 pounds. And usually, when I'm in church lecturing, she's usually sitting out there or standing beside me. If you ask me, I can probably tell you what outfit she's got on. She's a remarkable little Scot-Irish woman. Very, very strong. And she comes to every seance. There was one seance I didn't let her talk. Oops. Don't do that to your mom. I'll never forget that. There was a family. We had this big family for a seance, and she came through, and I said, Mom, I can't talk to you. These people are paying us, and we got to, give them the time. Boy, for the next week, she didn't leave me alone. And my mother is also Chatty Cathy. She talks a lot. And I love her to death. But every now and then I have to say, be quiet for a minute. Give me a break.
Now, I'm sure that there are some listeners out there who might like to know. So if she's one of those who's present and prevalent in your awareness, does she provide you with information like as a guide would be assumed to do so? For
Sometimes she brings people through. Oh, I've forgotten whether it was her or my dad, but one of my former pastors had a granddaughter who was taken to the hospital with a stomach disorder and died 10 days later. And they needed closure, and they wanted to find out some things. And we had a seance at the house. And I've forgotten whether it was my mother or my dad, but one of them came through. And we said, can you go find Emily? He was back. Whoever went and got her had Emily back within about a minute. And we got all this information from Emily to transfer to the family. And it was all evidential, and it all made sense.
And see, so this is really the essence of being in service as a medium in spirit.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. And so I imagine there are probably several other accounts of this kind of dynamic that comes through, even at church. When somebody shows up,
you never know, because like I said, the spirit that wants to talk to you is the one that will make contact, not necessarily the one. Because people will say, "Well, I came and I was hoping to talk to my mother, and you got to talk to your father and your brother and your uncle, but not mom." Because mom didn't feel it was necessary for her to talk to you that day. And that's all you can do. You have to trust. And mediumship is, another aspect of mediumship is trust. Trust that the information you are receiving is accurate. It may not be known to you right this minute, the listener, but you don't know how many people I have given information to that have told me, no, that's all wrong. They called me 3 days later and said it was all right. When I was a student at Cassadaga, one of the things that happens is before you're certified is you do mediums night several times, and the board members come to your table. Well, this lady came to my table. She wasn't a board member, and I brought through her mother. And the only reason I know this is because she called me. I brought through her mother, and I gave her some letters that were in the name. And no, that's not my mother. 3 years later, I get a phone call over at the Purple Rose, which is across the street. Call this number in Chicago. Okay. I called it. It was this lady. She said, I know you were being tested for your qualification. And she said, I said that it wasn't my mother. And she said, I had forgotten how my mother spelled her name in the old country.
Oh, wow.
You were absolutely right. 3 years later.
And, and so this goes into something here as far as trusting in oneself, as far as, say, for a medium or somebody who has abilities out there, and then to initially encounter this, oh, no, that doesn't make any sense to me, it's not right, as it were, and then to actually find out, what is the advice, once again, to those mediums out there, people who actually are channeling information or receiving information?
There's 2 pieces of advice I would give. Number 1, trust in what you're receiving. And if people question it, tell them to take it with them and think about it and see what happens. Another thing, though, you can be brutally honest. I remember a man, I had done 9 full readings in a row. That's a lot.
Wow.
I'd been reading all day long. He came in, and after about 10 minutes, I was not connecting with him, and he was not understanding anything. I handed him his money back, and I said, there's no charge. I want you to go find somebody else that you can connect with better. And he said, you're one of the first honest mediums I've met. And he thanked me profusely for being honest about it, and he went and found somebody else and got a better answer.
Yeah. Talk about
but
integrity.
I think and it doesn't happen very often, but I think you have to be ready to say, we are not connecting, and I want you to get good information, so why don't you go pick someone else?
And it's not personal. It has nothing to do with it being personal. It's just that there's some element of rapport at whatever level that wasn't coming through, and to be attuned and to be aware and actually be able to be authentic in that.
Yeah.
And to share that, because otherwise, who are you in service to?
Yeah.
The great God of money.
Right.
And that's a continuing problem ever since the beginning with the Fox sisters, because people realized that people would pay money, in cases big bucks, to be connected with their deceased relatives. And people got interested in making money. And boy, did you have fraud. Whoa. Do we still have fraud? Yeah, we do. That's why I'm up front with people. If I'm not getting the information, I tell them I'm not getting it. And another thing to remember, as Warren Hoover told me at Cassadaga, some days we're just wrong.
That's right. Yeah.
Doesn't happen too often, but some days we are just wrong.
Yeah.
So
Now, let's talk a little bit about correspondence work, because I know that's where we're leading to at the last hour. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
let's get a little further into that, because I'm sure that has to do with either having some real clarity and coherence in the evidence, at least that's coming through, at least that comes through the medium, and whether or not that gels and jives with the physical evidence, so to speak, on a particular investigation, depending on how it's being conducted with controls and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I ran into the cross correspondences case, and I found it. I'm one of the very few people that knows anything about it. I ran into it when I was doing my thesis. And you have to realize there's many times when I was writing my thesis, it was 3 in the morning, and I'm working on the computer. And, of course, what's happened before that is that I was peacefully sleeping, and Spirit comes and whispers a paragraph or 2 in my ear, and I'm saying, I'm asleep, go away. And so they repeat it a little louder, and I'm saying, I'm still asleep. No, you're not. Wake up. And by about the 4th or 5th time, they're shouting it at me. And I say, okay. And I get up and I go type, and then I'd go back to bed and sleep. Well, one night, they got me up, And I don't remember how it happened. All I know is that I was going through some sites on Google, and it came up the Cross Correspondence's case, and I clicked on it. And it has changed my life. Absolutely unbelievable stuff. Now, if you're interested, the boys here in the studio will tell you I never do anything without handing out the name of books. Okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Get your pens and paper if you don't already have them, because we have one for you.
and for this one, get your wallet out. There's a book out there called The Eager Dead by Archie Roy. What did we find? $1,700? $2,500?
First one was $300, then it was an $800 copy, and then the most expensive copy
It was like $3,000 or something.
It was almost $3,000 for the book, and it was published in February of 2008.
Yeah.
So it's not even that old.
This is
Yeah.
not an old book, but it's so good.
Yes.
And so The Eager Dead by Archie Roy. And I'm going to go through several books here. There is a book called Human Personality and Its Survival of Bodily Death by F.W.H. Myers, M-Y-E-R-S.
And once again, that title is?
Human Personality and Its Survival of Bodily Death. Now, what you're going to find when you go to buy that book is you're going to find an abridged version. It's 2 volumes. Now, if you own a Kindle or a Nook, you can find the original 2 volumes, and they'll be free because there's ancient, written in the 1890s, and you can read the whole thing. I've got both. I've got the originals, and I've got the abridged version. Now, Dr. Myers died in 1901. Physical body died. Almost immediately, he started doing what he talked about when he was here on the earth plane. That is, he started organizing those on the other side.
And of course,
He started organizing those on the other side to send messages in fragments. Now, I want to read you a quote. I got to find it. He said something about why it is so difficult to get a message across. In fact, I had somebody one night from England about 3 in the morning. This request came through. Does anybody know Dr. Myers' quote? And I thought, yeah, I do. So I'm looking for it. I'll be with you in a minute.
Now, those listeners also, too, that want to read a copy of Reverend Ben Cox's thesis, they can Google search it. I did several months ago, is to search through his name and also put in Rollins College, or Rollins College, Benjamin, how's it, Ben Cox or Benjamin Cox? I forgot how I searched it.
It may be Benjamin R. Cox or it may be Reverend Ben Cox.
Yeah.
It's in there both ways.
And that would be Rollins College in Winter Park,
Winter
Florida.
Park, Florida, right.
Rollins, I believe it is.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Well, I don't find it here. I'm looking for it. It's in here. But he said that trying to get a message through a medium is like talking to an obtuse, reluctant secretary who is on the other side of frosted glass that deadens sound, and it makes it almost impossible to get through exactly what you want to get through. And that's why the Cross Correspondence case was so valuable, because these fragments came through exactly in a certain way, and they had to be put together. And you had mediums working on this all the way from Leonora Piper in Boston to somebody she was under an assumed name, but she was Rudyard Kipling's sister in New Delhi, India.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that much space. And they were scattered from America, Ireland, England, Europe, and then over into India. So.
And so this is, really evidence of quantum phenomena,
Yeah.
right?
And
The quantum body.
Quantum entanglement. Yeah.
Well, I wish I could find that quote. It's in here somewhere. But anyway, so Myers is going to send, along with Edward Gurney, and several others. They are going to send messages to all these mediums for the next 31 years. Now, I got to qualify that real fast.
Yeah.
Because my friend Robin Foy, who now lives in Spain, founded a group in England called the Scole Group, S-C-O-L-E, and they were hearing from Dr. Myers as late as 2008. So Dr. Myers has been sending and organizing messages for at least 107 years.
Even though it was only supposed to initially occur for, 31 you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and once again, that would be like, in whose time, right?
Yeah.
What is the quality?
Right.
And
Quantification.
there is a
Exactly.
DVD out, movie documentary DVD out that you can find on Amazon. We'll probably post that on the website too for people who want to do some research on the Scole Group. What
There's
was the
two.
name of the
There's
documentary?
two.
I think
I
it
wish
was,
you hadn't asked. It's not in my bibliography here.
And so what we're going to do is we are going to post those up on our Amazon affiliate page through Conscious Radio Network. So take a look at that within the next few days if we don't already have some of these up there.
Yeah.
And there's books. Robin wrote the big book, and it's about being a witness. It is a seance by seance record of what they experienced. But these people, the Scole Group, they lived in a little town in England, in Anglia, called Scole. And they had a house with a basement, and the basement was painted midnight blue. And when you shut that door, it was sealed. There was no light source at all. And they would go down there 2 to 3 times a week and sit in the dark. And a couple of them were mediums. But they started getting lights. They started getting sounds. They would take rolls of unopened film and sit them on a little plexiglass table. And when they opened them, now these were unopened, they were sealed. When they opened them, they had pictures and writing on them. Some of the writing, one of the things was a German poem that they have just in the last couple of years figured out who wrote it and where it was published.
Wow.
I mean, this is all going on.
Yeah, I think I found it here. It's on our Amazon Associates page. It's called the Afterlife Experiments.
Well, that's
One of them.
Can you scroll down?
Yeah,
'Cause
breakthrough.
I know what they look like.
Breakthrough of Scientific Evidence of Life After Death.
I don't think.
PhD Gary E. Schwartz.
Can you scroll down?
Deepak Chopra. There we go. The Skull Experiment.
Yeah, that's one of them.
Scientific Evidence of Life
Are
After
you on
Death.
books or are you on DVDs?
A little bit of both. We got Kindle edition books, paperback. Let me see.
I've got both of them. I've got both of the DVDs and I've got all the books.
And so let's talk about how some of this comes up actually in your experience with things coming through that you're aware of, that where you get confirmation from others.
I get all kinds of confirmation all the time. I mean, people will tell me, you were spot on. You were absolutely right. The information you gave me was absolutely relevant. It was, that was so-and-so. I know exactly who that was.
And what type of information do they typically seem to really get into where they get the aha moment about who it is that you've found throughout your years of experience? What type of information?
Well, let me put it this way. I did a short reading. You heard me mention Mrs. Dalmat at South Lake High School. I went over to her room one day, and I said, I'm getting a vibration around you that tells me she's your grandmother. Is your grandmother in spirit? Yes. And I told her something that her grandmother would say, that she was saying to her right then. And she says, that's exactly the way my grandmother talked. And I said, are you wearing a pearl ring right now that belonged to her? She held up her hand. There it was. Because the grandmother had told me that she had a pearl ring and she was wearing it.
Wow.
I had not looked at her hands. I didn't know that. I mean, you get confirmations like that all the time. Then, of course, you get the ones who say, I have no idea who you're talking about, but I'll go home and think about it. Mm-hmm. Hopefully they'll go home and think about it.
Right.
But like I said, you get confirmations all the time. And when I'm reading for people, sometimes I'll say, is this making any sense? Right. I don't ask them for confirmations unless they give me one. And I try not to ask questions. If I do ask a question, I will say, I am seeing this, or I'm hearing this, or I'm feeling this. Does that make sense to you? Can you identify with that? Or I'm picking up this vibration who is telling me they are this person. Do you know that person? And they look like this. Do you recognize that? So I ask the question after rather than before.
Right, instead of leading the witness.
To clarify.
Yeah.
To clarify.
Yeah. Now, as far as the different phenomena that you described in Skull, England, with photographic film that was still sealed, that when they developed the film, they processed the film, that it had a different writing.
It had pictures that were from like World War I. It had writing. It had German poetry. It had English writing, different handwritings. And in my reading room, I have a set of little orchestra bells. They're the little tubular bells. You brush them with a drumstick. It goes, They kept a set of those hanging by a string, and the spirits would announce themselves with those little bells. One night in a seance at my house, I had them connected to a wire music stand, and the music stand fell over. And there was this clank, 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 clank. And I said, oh, was that the bells? No, the music stand fell over. But, I'm always listening for things. And like I said, this skull group, the material they got was so remarkable. You just have to go into it and read it and listen to it. And Robin is starting a new group in Europe. Forgotten where he said that. I think they're going to go to Hungary.
Wow.
And they're going to start working there. But he's starting a whole new skull group. The original skull group met for 9 years. And the spirit world told them, we have given you the information. We've proven communication. We've done this, that, and the other. We're going to stop now. But I will give you all the titles of all the books, all the DVDs, all the information so you can publish it. That's fascinating stuff.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I bet you that there are some people out there who are thinking about, okay, so how are these investigations conducted? And in the case of, say, these that Reverend Ben has just mentioned with the Skull Group, and then also this new one that's developing in Hungary. And then just thinking about what we see on TV that is sort of presented as paranormal investigations, and then some people call it ghost hunting and all this other stuff. Let's talk a little bit about that, because coming from more of a theological background and a ministerial background, I imagine there are some points to be made about ghost hunting and paranormal investigation, especially these commercially broadcast entities.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, they're all fear-based. I mean, I watch these things, and these guys, they're looking for spirits. Okay, fine. I'll go for that. But they'll hear something. What was that? There's no respect. There's no working with spirit. You've got to establish a rapport. You've got to work at it. You don't just barge in. You've got to establish rapport. You've got to establish the rules. It's got to be done a certain way. You've got to respect the spirit world. And the spirit world will respond and give you information to prove that they are there. But if you're playing a fear-based game, let's frighten me to death, they'll be glad to do that too.
That's right. And you'll, of course, attract the ones who would be attracted to the Parker Brothers board game or something like that.
Yeah, you're attracting lower level.
The like attracts like.
Undeveloped spirits.
Now, some folks would say, well, okay, as an example, the folks who would say just open up the house to whatever wants to come in, okay, unqualified and not putting this in the light where only the highest and the best can come through. Thinking about that, and then thinking about television broadcast, and this is really ultimately a lot of these shows are presented as documentary or as reality. And this is really elusive, I think, for most people out there who might really want to know how it is when it's coming from a respectful approach.
Yeah.
Well, you're not gonna get the lower order stuff. You're not gonna get the fear. You're not gonna get the violence. You're not gonna get things thrown at you. And please remember, if a spirit moves something, they've had to work at that. Mm-hmm. If you remember the movie, now that I can't think of it,
Ghost.
Yeah.
Where he has to work to move that penny. They have to work to move things. It's not just something they do.
Yeah, it's almost like us trying to learn a new instrument.
Right.
We got to work at it, or a person who wants to.
And I really
unfoldment.
object to these things because it's all about sensationalism, and let's scare people, and let's amaze people, and let's blah blah blah. People will be more amazed by genuine phenomena than they will by just being thrilled or scared or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And see, this was the interesting thing, and this will also be posted soon, and that is some footage and recordings from the Seven Sisters Inn on January 23rd and 24th. And the night of the 23rd, we were downstairs with John Zaffis of Haunted Collector acclaim on the Sci-Fi Channel. And we were working with a hacked radio, and basically how that session was conducted was ask questions, and there will be either yeses or nos or other information that will come through. And eventually there was a conversation that ensued, but it was through the clarity and honesty and integrity of intention behind it. And I was blown away by what occurred.
Yeah, and that lasted about a good 30 minutes.
Yeah, it was a beautiful conversation.
Yeah.
Well, I've had the joy of doing some investigations with Dr. Mekas in Claremont and with the two of you in Howie. The one in Howie was just so remarkable to me. I mean, and the way we set that up was exactly right. I would never have walked in there and sat down at that table and said, I'm opening this up to anybody that wants to come through that's here. Never in my life would I do that. We set the intention, we set everything, we set the protections. We got family members, we got children, we got the gardener and his name, and also the proof was we opened a vortex to the spirit world. And a lot of people wonder, why is it colder? Because the spirits have to lower their vibration to get into our dense material plane here.
Just as we have to raise our vibration, and that would be through prayerful, meditative states.
So, we had a vortex open over that table, and it was cold. I mean, the house was cold to start with, but this was 15 to 20 degrees lower than the house. And I'll never forget, Heather was sitting next to me, and my hands are on the table, and they're like 2 blocks of ice. I reached over and touched her, and she yipped because it was so cold. She went, oh! And yet, with all that activity, the spirits were lining up behind us, and they were polite, and it all had to do with how this thing was set up.
It was very orderly, and it was rather formal yet informal, but there was no barging through or any kind of It felt nice. It was beautiful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It almost felt like everybody was picking a number at the deli counter at Publix waiting for a sandwich.
That's a good analogy. Excellent analogy.
And I keep finding myself thinking that it could have been that way in the Perron's farmhouse. Had it been done correctly. And I realize I'm criticizing some very famous people.
Sure.
but I don't care. There's a way to do it right, and there's a way to do it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do it wrong, you run the risk of all kinds of things. So I think we need to be careful. I really do.
That's
Yeah.
right. It's how we conduct ourselves ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And laying the groundwork. It's kind of like setting the group norms in the classroom. At the beginning of the year, or this is how it's going to go, and this is what's expected. And
Yep.
it's really clear. And I think when you get a group of people who are in there for the same reasons, the same, or at least very similar intentions, and that vibration is such that it creates a very beautiful experience.
Right, exactly.
For spirit and
Right,
for
right.
spirit
Right.
Yeah.
in the flesh and in the next dimension.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason for a seance to turn violent. There's really not. And if you're bringing through lower order and things like that, you need to shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget that one we did in Ocala.
That's the one I was going to mention.
night,
You were reading my
Because
mind.
that lady,
Yeah.
we had a lady on the table. She was a medium, but she was rude.
Mm-hmm.
And she was badgering Charles. We found out later that Charles did not do what he was accused of doing.
Yeah.
But she was badgering him. And he finally picked up the table and threw it and broke a leg. I had to send a leg back to Maine to have it repaired.
On the table.
Yeah.
Broke a leg of the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he stopped it. And the funny thing was, she didn't have a clue as to what happened. She went to Rick and she said, "What was that about?" He said, "You were pushy and you were rude, and he stopped the seance." And I had to say to Joe Rothenberger, "Don't let her come back." Because they've got some fabulous people up there. Kayla's just wow.
Yeah.
Kayla's wonderful.
Yeah.
But I love working with Claremont Paranormal. I love working with the Seven Sisters because of the intention of the whole thing. It's not sensational.
Mm-hmm.
It's not let's see who we can scare or who we can give the biggest thrill. It's let's see what the spirit world has to say.
Right. And engaging in a structured conversation from the heart, whatever that
And
is.
also proving that it's real. And it's real and it's not bad.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like with Claremont Paranormal, we're reestablishing a relationship with both sides, the living and those who have passed over.
Right.
And try to communicate and establish a communication to where we can understand what phenomenon is actually happening on our client's part and why it's happening.
And you see, you're battling on one side, you're battling the church. Because the church wants everything to go through the church.
Right.
I'm sorry, it's all about money and control. I wish it wasn't, but it is. And they want to control everything, and they don't want you or me to be able to make that connection without them.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that frustrates them with spiritualists and spiritual people, is they don't need that church to be that intermediary for them.
Right. And of course, it's really interesting to think that really for someone, say a medium, who can connect, who is able to at least derive that clarity and deliver the message as such, and even facilitate the conversation from this living individual in the three-dimensional flesh form with, say, the loved one who is on the other side, versus having to go through, strictly go through a man to be absolved of whatever, and to have to continue to pay more money in order to get out of it. And really, what is that doing? I mean, what does that do to an individual who believes that to be true?
It makes them dependent, psychologically dependent, And you can even, I've had people, I had a girl come over to my reading room in Cassadaga years ago who had a baby, and the baby had died. Tragic. And she was convinced that she had killed the baby. And we had to go find the baby in spirit and bring her back. And over the next 2 or 3 weeks, she was calling me every day. We have people that can get very dependent upon mediums. I think that if you're going to work with a medium or a psychic, you should do it about every 6 months, no sooner than that. Because if they're going to tell you things that have happened and explain what's going on, you got to give things time to work out. And that's one of the problems with having weekly message services, especially in a small church. You're reading for the same 10 people every week.
Right, it's like pick me, or I hope somebody comes through, right? That sort of thing.
Right.
And it almost becomes a codependency as such,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
That's why in the fall and hopefully during the summer, I'm going to institute a student message service one Sunday a month. So at least whatever messages we bring through and information has 4 more weeks to work itself out before we come back together again.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So I'm thinking my way through this whole thing. I think I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be fun, and my students are going to learn a lot doing it.
And that's the thing too. So going back to, it's almost like having, if it's not an experiment, but if it were, that would be the control, how it's set up, where there will be an interval and where things can unfold on their own. That those folks out there who receive the messages, and actually for the medium who is giving the messages, to have that time to see what happens, I mean, was this accurate information, and what occurs?
Yeah.
Because we're going to have little forms that we fill out, evaluation forms, so everybody knows month to month how you're doing. And we move from a 2 to 3 minute message, and then we let you go on to about 5 or 6 minutes, and then eventually we can work you up to 15 minutes. Then we work up, like this next festival, Elaine Tomkowitz, who is an advanced student. She came in having had a lot of experience. She's going to do 15-minute readings. However, I have the ace up my sleeve. Since she's a student, her readings are half price. Why not get 2 and get a full half hour?
Yeah.
And this is an interesting thing too, because as far as accountability goes, and I think this is something that can really go miles for the folks out there who might be at the receiving end looking for potentially having a reading. To go to a psychic fair, at Chapel of Spiritual Light is different, really, in a way, than going to a lot of other places and getting a reading done, because there is that accountability that these mediums have, first to going through a process of being observed, of that sort of being checked out, as far as how they're going to conduct themselves, instead of just going to any particular place on the side of the road that says they do readings, for.
Yeah. Now the next psychic fair is February 21st?
21st, yes.
Saturday, February 21st at the Chapel of Spiritual Light, which is located in Orlando, Florida, 1700 Edgewater Drive, Orlando.
And that's in College Park, if you're familiar with the greater Orlando area, that's College Park.
Mm-hmm.
And they're always a lot of fun, because you have people sitting out in the lobby and everybody's talking, and I'm there being Mr. Social and introducing everybody. And sometimes I take people in and walk them through and say, this is so-and-so, they do this, and this is so-and-so. She reads tarot cards, and this one's an intuitive, and this one does Reiki. This one does numerology. And what venue would you like to investigate? Or which venues would you like to investigate?
That's right. Now, could you talk a little bit about the difference between, like, a reading from a medium versus a psychic reading? Because there is a distinction.
Yes. A psychic is going to read the more material, earthly things. They're going to look at your aura. They're going to look at your relationships. They're going to look at your money situation. Now, does that say that mediums will never do that? No. Because all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. The aspect that the medium adds to it is they are going to bring through that communication with the world of spirit. Friends, relatives, acquaintances, guides, and I try in my readings to bring through those that can be evidential. If I get too far back in a family, let's say I'm dealing with somebody's great-grandparents that are right there talking to me, but these people don't know them and can't verify them, I will ask them to pull back and send those through that can be verified.
Right.
So that the people that are experiencing this get the evidence that they are looking for. Because if you give people honest evidence, they're going to believe it.
Yeah.
And there will be validity inherent to it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a lot like when we had George Lopez on the station a couple weeks ago when he made that
About having mediums
about-
on an
about
investigation.
when he was in the vehicle when that research
friend.
member, I forgot what her name was, but
The friend of his.
when she had passed away and he was asking for a sign and whatnot, and then the sign came through, and even Andrea had said, if Spirit's going to give you a message that you've asked for, it's going to be unmistakable. Nobody, I mean,
Right.
something so, you can't confuse it with anything else.
Right.
A sign, a symbol, anything.
And it's interesting, too, because in my experience, when Sydney gave that reading to me one morning, it must have been my second Sunday at church, she totally had my grandmother, my father's mother right there. All the mannerisms, everything. It was uncanny. I was blown away. Yeah. So when they do come through, it is unmistakable, and I think that's where it has the most meaning. And so it very clear.
See, like I said, this is when Gail's grandmother came through and said what she said. That's exactly the way my grandmother talked, And I remember one night we were doing a house party in Orlando, and I told this woman, she was going through a divorce, and it was not pleasant. And her father was there, and her father was a very nice person. But he told her, don't take any crap off anybody. And she says, Daddy wouldn't say crap. He was a gentleman. I said, he's angry at what's happened to you. And he expressed it just that way.
Yeah.
I said, I said, I am aware of his personality. He would not have normally done that.
Right, but that word was a little more benign than other words that could have been used.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, he wouldn't have done that. He would.
Yeah.
He just wasn't built that way.
Right.
And sometimes, I've had times when Spirit has come through and they've given me something, and I have said, I can't say that. I can't say it that way. Give it to me another way. And they will. They're just sometimes you can't be that blunt.
Mm-hmm.
Like the problem with medical things.
Yes.
We cannot diagnose
Yeah.
because we're not doctors. But I'll never forget Lori Berry in Ocala. Lovely, lovely lady. Came to me 7 years ago. And I told her, I said, I can't diagnose, but you got something going on down in this area, down in the colon area. It looks to me to be black and toxic, psychically speaking. I don't know what it is, but I want you to have it checked. She was full of colon cancer.
Wow.
However, she asked me, will I live to see my son's graduation? Yes. No hesitation.
There's some clarity.
The only reason I know that is because she tells me about it. The son is now 26 years old. And Lori, she's had at least half her liver removed and other things, but she's still in remission and she's still doing well.
Wow.
And she's on this side.
Right here.
Yeah.
And when Rick and I did house parties up there, Lori had always come for healing. She's a remarkable lady.
Mm-hmm. That's the
And
thing, too, is like when you get messages, something very, very sensitive, something that possibly it would be very hard for the sitter or the client to accept how to deliver that message.
Or do you?
Or do you?
Somebody comes to you and says, is my husband having an affair?
Yeah, boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't really.
And-
What do you do?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you waffle.
Yeah.
But you tell them, I don't know why you're feeling this way, but that's a question that ethically I can't answer.
Yeah. And that's the thing. From a psychotherapeutic standpoint, to implant any bit of doubt within the person, you can be held, as far as a therapist goes, you can be held really in what would be called, it would be malpractice.
Yeah.
We had a medium who is now deceased at Cassadaga who every now and then told people things that were so bizarre, and they finally had to just kind of hold him back and not let him do message services and things like that because he'd frighten people. Just bizarre things would come through. So
Wow.
And another thing that is not normal, spirit will not have the medium ask for money. There was a situation that I'm aware of where some friends of mine worked with a medium, and the medium would be channeling, and the guy that the medium was channeling would say, now so-and-so who is my medium here would never ask for financial help, but she needs it.
Wow.
And I don't see that. I don't see, again, I was taught ethics.
Yeah.
There are things you do and there are ways that you do it. And, you don't just barge in. I mean, I can do what Teresa Caputo does.
Sure.
I can walk through Publix and I can give a message to everybody I see about who's standing next to them. I can do that. Is that the right thing to do? No. Because I'm in the frozen food section, and the little old lady from England, this actually happened, the little old lady from England says, can you reach that box of frozen peas up there? Yes. And I gave it to her. And standing beside her is a relative. Now, she doesn't know me from Adam's house cat. If I stand there and I say, I'm a medium and your sister is here and she wants to talk to you, and here we are in Publix in the frozen food section, she's going to call the manager and the police. Whereas if I influence that spirit and I say, bring her to my reading room or to some place where she can get the right kind of communication, that's what you have to do.
That's the intervention.
You have to be ethical. And there's certain, like I said, this business about just going in and opening it up to everybody that's in the house to come through, that's ethics. You don't do that.